Hello everyone. Welcome back to Bioscholar. Imagine a lake once teeming with fish, now eerily empty. Forests thriving with birds, suddenly silent. What happened? Invisible invaders, species humans brought, are quietly taking over ecosystems, and most of us don't even notice. Now, before we go any further, let's first understand what invasive species actually are. Invasive species are plants, animals, or microorganisms that do not naturally belong to an ecosystem. When they are introduced, mostly because of human activities, they spread very fast and start harming native species and the environment. It's important to understand that not every non-native species is invasive. A species becomes invasive only when it grows out of control, disrupts the natural balance, and leaves native species struggling to survive. Now that we understand what invasive species are, it's important to distinguish them from native and non-native species. Native species are organisms that have naturally evolved and exist in an ecosystem without human introduction. Non-native species, also called exotic or introduced species, are those brought into an ecosystem by human activities, but they do not necessarily cause harm. What makes a non-native species invasive is a combination of specific traits. Most invasive species exhibit rapid growth and reproduction, allowing them to establish populations quickly. In addition, they often lack natural predators or controlling factors in the new ecosystem. This absence of biological control enables them to outcompete native species and disrupt ecological balance. Most invasive species do not reach new ecosystems on their own. In almost all cases, their introduction is linked to human activity. With increased global travel and trade, organisms are transported across natural geographic barriers that would normally limit their spread. Some species are introduced intentionally, such as plants brought for agriculture, gardening, or biological control. Others arrive accidentally through cargo shipments, ballast water of ships, or the pet trade. Once introduced, these species encounter environments where ecological controls like predators, parasites, or competitors are absent or ineffective. This allows them to establish populations, spread rapidly, and eventually become invasive. Once invasive species establish themselves, their effects become evident at multiple levels of the ecosystem. One of the primary impacts is competition. Invasive species often consume resources such as food, light, space, and nutrients more efficiently than native species, leading to population decline of native organisms. In some cases, invasive species act as novel predators. Native species that lack evolutionary exposure to these predators are unable to respond effectively, resulting in rapid population loss. Invasive species also alter food web dynamics. Changes at one trophic level can affect multiple connected species, leading to instability within the ecosystem. Over time, invasive species can modify physical and chemical characteristics of habitats, such as soil composition, water quality, or vegetation structure. These habitat changes further reduce the survival capacity of native species. In 1935, cane toads were deliberately introduced into Australia to control insect pests in sugarcane plantations. However, the toads failed to reduce pest populations. Instead, they spread rapidly across northern Australia. Cane toads possess toxic skin secretions, which proved lethal to native predators such as snakes, lizards, and marsupials that had no evolutionary resistance to these toxins. As predator populations declined, ecological balance was disrupted across multiple food chains. This introduction is now considered one of the most significant invasive species events in Australia, demonstrating how a single management decision can cause long-term ecological damage. This was not an isolated incident. A similar ecological disruption occurred earlier, driven by a different species but with equally severe consequences. In 1859, European rabbits were introduced into Australia for hunting purposes. At the time, the ecological consequences were not considered. In the absence of natural predators and population control mechanisms, rabbit numbers increased rapidly and spread across the continent. Rabbits consumed large quantities of vegetation, leading to extensive overgrazing. This resulted in soil erosion, loss of plant cover, and degradation of habitats required by native herbivores. The long-term impact included reduced biodiversity and permanent alteration of terrestrial ecosystems. This case illustrates how rapid reproduction combined with a lack of ecological regulation can transform entire landscapes. While these examples come from terrestrial ecosystems, invasive species have caused equally severe damage in aquatic environments. Zebra mussels were first detected in the Great Lakes in 1988, after being transported unintentionally through ballast water discharged from cargo ships. Once introduced, they established dense populations across freshwater systems in North America. Zebra mussels attach to hard surfaces in large numbers, including native mussels, water intake pipes, and infrastructure. This led to the displacement of native mussel species and significant alterations in nutrient cycling within aquatic ecosystems. Their spread also resulted in major economic consequences, as clogged water systems required costly maintenance. Ecologically, their presence caused long-term changes in freshwater biodiversity and ecosystem function. Invasive species are not limited to animals. Several plant species have also become invasive, spreading aggressively and altering ecosystems. For example, water hyacinth, kudzu vine, and lantana. These invasive plants outcompete native vegetation, modify habitats, and reduce biodiversity. After understanding the damage invasive species cause, the next question is how these species can be controlled. Controlling invasive species is complex and often requires multiple approaches. One method is mechanical control, which involves the physical removal of invasive organisms through harvesting, trapping, or cutting. This method is effective in limited areas but is difficult to apply on a large scale. Chemical control uses pesticides or herbicides to reduce invasive populations. While effective in some cases, this approach carries risks, including harm to non-target species and environmental contamination. Biological control involves introducing natural enemies, such as predators, parasites, or pathogens, to regulate invasive populations. This method requires strict scientific evaluation, as poorly planned biological control can create additional ecological problems. In most cases, prevention remains the most effective strategy. Monitoring, regulation of trade, and public awareness reduce the risk of new invasions and limit long-term ecological damage. Invasive species show us how delicate ecosystems truly are. Once balance is disturbed, recovery can take decades. Understanding this science is the first step toward protecting biodiversity and preventing future invasions. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, stay connected for more science-based explorations of the natural world.